Good morning and welcome all, and thank you for joining today's Adbri webinar. My name is Matt Holdstock and I'm one of the Adbri's oenologists, and I'll be your webinar host for this morning. In the spirit of reconciliation, the Adbri would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and the community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. So in this morning's session, we're going to take a look at the very topical subject in Australia at the moment. That's the weather and the upcoming forecast with a webinar titled Seasonal Climate Outlook for Summer 2022 to 2023. So before we jump in and make a start, just a couple of quick reminders to anyone who is new to the Adbri webinar platform. If you'd like to provide a comment or ask a question, please click on the Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar, type in your question and click send to send it through. We'll hold the Q&A session at the end of this presentation, but feel free to send through your questions at any stage throughout the webinar. A reminder also that this session is being recorded today, and it will be and an email will be sent through of the recording, which is located on the Adbri's YouTube channel. So for anyone who's just joined, welcome. Today's webinar topic is Seasonal Climate Outlook for the summer of 2022 to 2023. And it's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Janatan Nahar and Dr. Lynette Bettiot from the Bureau of Meteorology. Dr. Janatan is an extended prediction specialist at the Bureau of Meteorology. She's a professional hydroclimatologist specialised in climate projection and has more than 15 years of experience in the climate and hydrology sector. Janatan obtained her PhD from the University of New South Wales in climate modelling and drought projection. Janatan is passionate about bringing large-scale climate information into the time, space and sector-specific domain based on customer needs. She has experience in Australian water assessments, especially for the Murray-Darling Basin, and she has experience in developing design rainfalls and extreme rainfall analysis. That's quite appropriate for today's webinar. And our co-presenter, Dr. Lynette Bettiot, she's a technical lead for climate risk in the Environmental Prediction Services team at the Bureau of Meteorology. Lynette has a PhD in climate science, and the Environmental Prediction Service team is responsible for delivering climate outlook information along with contextual climate data and analysis to develop strategic climate risk intelligence that meets the customer needs. Lynn examines and communicates on changes to Australia's climate, including long-term trends in rainfall and temperature and the interaction with extreme events. Another focus of Lynn's is drought across Australia and how the Bureau of Meteorology can best communicate and inform us around this. So, Janatan, if you're ready to make a start, I'll hand over to you. If you could just share your screen, and we can.
Thanks, Matt. Is it shared?
Yes, we can see that. Janatan, you're right to go. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to our today's presentation on seasonal climate outlook for summer 2022 and 23. There are a lot going on in terms of climate recently and few more to come, but we will highlight the important one relevant to the industry. So today's presentation is divided into 4 different segments, and first I will talk through our recent climate condition and the drivers of our climate, and then Lynette will take you through the long-range forecast or seasonal outlook and the trends in our extremes. So the biggest aspect of coming warm season, which has more relevance, is the heat wave and the flooding situation, which is actually ongoing too. But we will first have a look at what has happened in recent time, because the immediate past or the antecedent conditions sometimes play key role for what's coming next. So let's start with the rainfall condition and look at the year-to-date rainfall for 2022. So the left-hand side map is showing the year-to-date rainfall, and you can see that Eastern Australia has almost like 900 to 2400 millimeter of rain. We all know that it has been a wet year, but that's more specific for eastern part of Australia. And if we compare this rainfall with the historic mean, as we can see from the other map here, the year-to-date rainfall in terms of percentage of climatological mean, we can see that most part in the New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria, and Central Queensland have already received equal or above climatological mean annual rainfall, and yet another 1 month to go. So now let's look at the rainfall and temperature situation for the recent months, which is last 3 months, August to October, mostly the spring months. In the Murray-Darling Basin, the last 3 months rainfall compared to the historic, it was the highest on record. And for Australia, it was 105%, which is above average, and it was the third highest of record. And for New South Wales and Victoria, it is the highest. And if we look at the temperature, as we can understand that when we have so much rainfall, a wet year, so temperature is relatively lower compared to the long-term mean, and that's for southern part of Australia. However, the average temperature for August to October period was slightly above average for Australia, and that is coming from the contribution in the north. So let's move to the soil moisture condition, how this rainfall has translated to our landscape. So as we can see, this is the root zone soil moisture condition for October 2022. And it shows compared to previous 2 years October in 2020 and 2021, it was very much above average. And this is shown for root zone soil moisture, which is the top 1 meter of the soil. And other than our landscape, let's look at how the stream flow and our storage condition are at this moment. So with all this rainfall, we know the third consecutive La Nina going on. We have a very wet year, and all this rainwater is soaking through the ground, and landscape is saturated. The streams are full. We are seeing lots of flood, and most of the stream flows in the east and south of the country are very much above average. And especially in the Murray-Darling Basin, most stream flow locations have highest on record flow for this time of the year. And similarly, we can see like most of the storages in the country are almost near or at capacity. And we know that some of them are also overflowing. So with all this wet condition going on, it's naturally the forest fire danger index is really low. So we can see for October, it was almost lowest on record for Murray-Darling Basin. And for rest of the country, it was mostly very much below average. And that has gradually changed to less dangerous condition from August, September through October. So that was the recent climate condition. Let's look at what are the drivers of our climate and how they are influencing our climates in recent time. So there are a couple of important drivers of our climate in Australia. Of them, El Nino Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, is the most important one, and we all know that it has two phases, La Nina and El Nino, and currently we are running through a La Nina phase, and this is consecutive third La Nina in a row. And what's the typical pattern of La Nina in terms of rainfall during October to February? And that's shown on the map. October to February, because that's the typical active period for La Nina. So La Nina means like above average rainfall for south and north of Australia. More tropical cyclone is associated with the La Nina condition, and it increases the chance of widespread flooding, longer duration of heat wave in the southeast, and but that's less intense. And it also increased the chance of Indian Ocean heat wave. So the other than ENSO, the second most important drivers of our climate is Indian Ocean Dipole, or IOD. And I'm saying it negative because currently IOD is in negative phase, and that negative IOD phase is associated with, again, higher rainfall in the eastern part of Australia. It means cooler day in the south and warmer nights in the north, and it also increases the chance of flooding. And that's what we are observing at this moment. Other than ENSO and IOD, we have another important driver, which is called Southern Annular Mode, or SAM. What is SAM? SAM is actually a high pressure subtropical ridge system that sits on Australian continent and moves north to south. When SAM is positive, that means it is associated with more rainfall in the east and reduced chance of extreme heat in the spring and summer months, which is what we are seeing and will be seeing in coming months. So how these climate drivers, and so SAM and IOD, influence our rainfall pattern, let's look at that. So this is a map that shows the maximum rainfall month across the year for various locations in the country. And what are the drivers associated with these highest rainfall? And if we look at, I just brought spring and summer months here. So if we look at these two other maps, you can see that the most important drivers of our climate here is SAM, IOD, and ENSO for this time of the year. Now, just quickly wrap up the climate influence summary for current period. So we know that in terms of ENSO, we are in La Nina condition, and it is underway in the Pacific Ocean. And La Nina actually typically increases the chance of above average rainfall in the north and eastern Australia during spring, which we have seen, and also for summer months. And a negative IOD, or Indian Ocean Dipole event, is also underway, but our models indicate that the negative IOD may persist through November, which is almost there. Hopefully it will end soon. In terms of Southern Annular Mode, SAM is also in a positive phase, and it is forecasted to be positive until end of December this year. And positive SAM again will bring typically increased chance of above average rainfall for Eastern Australia. And in terms of ocean temperature, we are observing sea surface temperature warmer than average around the southern maritime continent and Australian coastline. So before moving to the next topic, I just wanted to highlight another thing. As we are approaching to the summer months, the most important climate aspect is heat wave at this moment. And what's the relation of longer duration heat wave with La Nina situation, which is ongoing now, is shown from this map. So it is different. The impact of La Nina on longer term heat wave is different for east and south. As we can see from the map, that La Nina is associated with shorter duration of heat wave in the east and part in the west. But it is quite different in the south. That means like that we may see longer duration heat wave in the south, like areas like Melbourne, Adelaide, and Tasmania. I think that's all from climate drivers update. The next is long range forecast and seasonal outlook. I will hand over to Lynette. Over to you, Lynette.
Thanks, Jonathan. So looking ahead, what can we expect for the coming season? So as Jonathan said, we've currently got these climate drivers active. And so if you go to the next slide, please, Jonathan, we're currently seeing that IOD starting to decay. But before we go into the actual outlooks, just having a look at what that forecast range uncertainty versus lead time. So looking at what you might do with planning, with the outlooks, and then with those longer term climate change projections. And I will be speaking to the monthly and seasonal outlook in this presentation, but just a reminder on our website that we have those outlooks for weekly and fortnightly conditions. So for all those periods beyond the weather forecast. So putting those boundaries, putting around those physical boundaries around what is more likely to be expected, given that we have those drivers in the atmosphere, such as La Nina, such as the negative Indian Ocean dipole. So if you go to the next slide, please, Jonathan. So just wanted to pause and just look at the outlook accuracy. So it is hard when we have something like a probabilistic outlook. So you have increased chances of having wetter than average conditions. It doesn't say how much rainfall you're going to get, but it gives you those probabilities of getting certain amounts of rainfall. Just wanted to draw your attention to this chart here, where it shows that during times of, it's not always the case, but during times when you have a strong driver active, as Jonathan said, that and so El Nino and La Nina are so important for Australia, that you tend to have more confidence in the outlook. And it'd be interesting too, I think, if the IOD was on here as well, or the corresponding phase of the IOD that helps, or SAM on here as well, to see the impacts of that as well, because similar to a situation like what we've got now, when you've got all those wet drivers lined up, nothing putting the brakes on the climate, you've got confidence, that higher confidence in the outlook, and you're seeing the impacts of all of those drivers and that wet outlook. So if you go to the next slide, please, Jonathan. So what can we looking ahead to December, what are we looking at? So for rainfall on the slide there's increased chances of wetter than average conditions over much of Eastern Australia, and especially in the southeast there, and increased chances of drier than average conditions in Western Australia. So Jonathan spoke about those wetter conditions that we've been seeing in the eastern parts of Australia, but also that southwest WA pocket has been quite dry recently, has been drier than average, and we are already starting to see some fires there, and it is forecast to be drier than average in the coming season. We can see with rainfall there, increased chances of above average rainfall in southeast Australia, but increased chances of dry conditions in southwest WA there. Looking at nighttime temperatures, increased chances of warmer nights over much of the country, and daytime temperatures, cooler days where it's expected to be cooler days where it is expected to be wetter than average, but warmer days where we're looking at increased chances of drier than average conditions. And I'll just pause there and talk to what Jonathan spoke about with the heat waves in La Nina years, with all those wet conditions that we see. We do tend to see those more humid conditions, those warmer, more humid conditions, and we don't see those intense heat waves, but we can see those longer, more sustained heat waves conditions. So next slide, please, Janet. And looking even further ahead, we can see that that signal starts to drop away. So with the Indian Ocean dipole tending to end, or ending when that monsoon, the conditions start coming into the southern hemisphere, knocking out that circulation, and with the La Nina forecast to drop away or weaken as we go into early next year, we're starting to see some of those drivers towards those wetter conditions drop away, and we're starting to see that signal in rainfall start to weaken as well. So we're starting to see not strong odds of above average rainfall over Eastern Australia, except for some of those coastal areas. Still some indication of drier than average conditions in Western Australia. Nighttime temperatures forecast to be more likely to be warmer than average over much of Australia. Still some indication of likely cooler than average daytime temperatures in New South Wales there, in eastern New South Wales, but increased chances of warmer than average days in Western Australia. and Tasmania and parts of South Australia there. So next slide, please. Just wanted to highlight the Forewarned Forearm project, which the wine industry supported, and really bringing that intelligence beyond that increased chances of above or below average conditions. So if you go to our Climate Outlooks page, which the link is there, you can see that again we have more periods available, 1 week, 2 week, and those 1 week and 2 week, they're recently being updated daily now, so they're more in line with the weather forecast. But you can click on any location, so it's not just a map of Australia you can look at. You can look at your farm gate and you can click on that, and you can get the odds for putting in those 20% bins. What are my odds of getting in that wettest 20%, or my odds of getting in the driest 20%? And you can see, if you see that little pop up on the map of Australia there, next to the word rainfall, there's a couple of charts you can click on. So you can also click on the climagram, so what have I had recently and what are my odds coming up, or you can click on the curve, a probability of exceedance curve. So for any amount of rainfall, what is my probability of getting that rainfall? There's also an interesting one too, we call it the burst potential, so chance of having at least 15 millimeters, I think that map says, in 3 days for a certain period. So what are your chances of not just getting a certain amount of rainfall in a period, but getting that that rain event coming through, which is really a nice way to get more intelligence about what the weather might bring. So next slide, please, Jonathan. And this is an example of some of these new products here. So again, moving beyond that, that above and below median to actually, well, what are the chances of getting unusually wet or the wettest 20% in the historical range? So for December, if you've been watching this for the last few months, this is actually starting to drop off a bit. We've seen much of Eastern Australia in the last few months have increased chances of getting in that top 20%, and unfortunately that's what we've seen in the observations. But that signal is starting to weaken a bit, and for southern parts of Australia, really confined to just that eastern Victoria and eastern New South Wales now, and dry for northern parts of the country. Oh, sorry, warm for the northern parts of the country, but not increased chances of warmer than average conditions in that top 20% elsewhere. Next slide, please. And looking ahead for the season, that was for December. And again, for the season, there's increased chances of being in that wettest 20% in parts of Southeast Australia. To the west of the country, we're not seeing that same signal, and chances of unusually dry, just in scattered parts of WA there, but not impacting largely on any of those winemaking regions. Next slide, please, Jonathan. And if we're looking at the daytime temperatures, so for daytime temperatures, increased chances for western parts of the country of having increased daytime temperatures in that top 20%, so where it's drier, and also looking for Tasmania as well, increased chances of having warmer daytime temperatures for western Tasmania there. Cooler daytime temperatures, there's increased chances of cooler daytime temperatures in some parts of central Victoria and eastern New South Wales. Next slide, please. And looking at nighttime temperatures, so increased chances of warmer nighttime temperatures over large parts of the southeast, and not really neutral pattern for cool nighttime temperatures. So warmer nights for some, increased chances of unusually warm nights for some parts of the country. Thank you. Jonathan, next slide. Just looking ahead for soil moisture. So we not only forecasting for rainfall and temperature now, we have the Australian Water Outlook where you can go and look at forecasts for soil moisture, and with soil moisture incorporating with what's already in the system, so what's in the bank, and having that rainfall going forward, there's increased chances of having more than average, greater than average soil moisture at 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months ahead. So increasing that, so we can see that wetter column through parts of the eastern states there. Still some soil moisture in the west, but not as, that column isn't as wet as what we see in the east. So next slide, please, Jonathan. So just wanted to go away and go have a bit more of a look at the longer term. So putting it in that bigger picture. So the State of the Climate report was released yesterday with the Bureau and CSIRO, and really speaking to those extremes, to those trends. And with those extremes that we see here, you know, it feels like we've seen a lot of them recently that we've, you know, had to deal with, swinging from those droughts to those floods and bushfires in there. And just where does this sit in the context of climate change? So if you go to the next slide, please, Jonathan. So just wanted to look at what is forecast. So similar to what we see in the seasonal outlook, what we see in the weather outlook, these projections are based on physical models, or what are the physical properties, how does it interact with each other. And these projections, again, similar to the observations of wetter conditions, that we're actually, and we are seeing wetter conditions, we're actually seeing a lot of these projections happening now with the climate change that we have seen so far. So we are seeing this is what is projected, where it is projected to have a longer fire season, more dangerous fire weather, which is what we've seen. It's projected to national and global temperature rise to continue with more heat waves, and that's what we're seeing. And things like that cool season rainfall decline across southern eastern Australia, which is what we've seen, and that heavy rainfall to become more intense, which is again what we're seeing in the observations. So all those physical models, it's playing out in our observed record. Can you go to the next slide, please? And just having a look at some of those things which will really impact on Australia and on agriculture and wine grape production. Those that increase in the frequency of extreme heat events. So we are seeing a warming climate, and we know that this has had an impact on wine grape production in terms of the season length, in terms of impact on the fruit. And looking at the frequency of extreme heat events is increasing. When you see that spike there for 2019, so we still have variability on that trend. So 2019, a large, very Australia's warmest year on record and a drought year, and had drivers towards drier conditions during that year, and we see a spike in extreme heat events. And though with the last 2 years, with the cooler conditions that we've seen, with the more La Nina-like conditions, not as strong a spike towards those really severe heat events, extreme heat events, but still increased. Next slide, please. And likewise fire weather. So there's been an increase generally in extreme fire weather and a longer fire season across parts of Australia, though again there is variability. And with the La Nina that we have at the moment, historically there has been a lower decrease in fire weather conditions during La Nina years. But having said that, with all the rainfall that we've had, there is a lot of vegetation growth out there, so we can still see an increased risk of grass fire as we get towards the end of summer, if we see those long dry periods where that vegetation can cure. And looking at southwest WA where it has been drier, this can lead to increased fire risk in southwest WA. So if you go to the next slide, please. And rainfall, we're not seeing that trend at the moment. We're seeing increased rainfall, but we have seen generally that decline of rainfall in the southeast and southwest of the country for that April to October period, and we are seeing it for some more southern parts in that summer period too. But looking at how much moisture or rainfall you might have in the bank leading into summer, there has been a decline in that. But having said that, if you go to the next slide, please, Jonathan. When you do have those rainfall events, when you do have all that La Nina and IOD lined up as you do now, there is an increase. We have seen heavy rainfall events becoming more intense. So even in parts of Australia where that average rainfall is expected to decrease, you can see that increase in heavy rainfall events. So as the climate warms, it can hold more water vapor, more moisture, but also that atmospheric moisture can give more energy to the rain systems. So if you go to the next slide, please. And just rainfall changes and planning for the future. Just wanted to look at climate services for agriculture here. So just again, this is at your farm gates and the link is there. So, and we actually have wine grape specific indices on this website. This is a project between CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology. So you can go and look at changes expected over your area for those wine grape specific indices or general indices of rainfall and temperature. And next slide, please. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Janison. Just a reminder, if anyone has any questions, just to type out the questions and send them through the Q&A button on the bottom of the toolbar. Now, we've also been joined by Rachel Davis. Rachel's an agricultural segment lead for the Bureau of Meteorology, and I might just get Rachel just to give us an introduction as to her role within the Bureau and the link between the science and the industry.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, and hello, everyone. I just joined the Bureau this January, and my role is to be an industry lead and feedback, the requirements for the wine industry back to our scientists and to tailor our products and services towards agriculture. So whilst we have, Lynette and Janison available, and they're all the smart scientists, it's my job to engage with industry and assist where possible outside of the technical parts of forecasting and climate outlooks. With a link between the industry and the scientists. So we've included our agriculture@bom.gov.au email address there if anyone has more questions or wants to provide feedback on the presentation, and I can channel that through to Lynette and Janison's team. I just wanted to also add that we've included links in the presentation to be used, and Lynette mentioned the Climate Services for Agriculture program and the projects that are ongoing with that. That's a great initiative for anyone to deep dive into. It's still in development phase. Happy to have feedback on that, and there's a feedback link when you go to that platform. And just want to touch on as well, we do have another project underway in our agriculture program at the moment called Agri-Climate Outlooks project. So there's a few initiatives there, and we're going to be standing up our first agriculture decision support team next year. So that's really exciting and really good for the agriculture industry. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. There's a couple of questions that have come through. I'll just touch on the mention about the resources you mentioned before, Rachel. So the Adabri will make available the resources and the links that you mentioned there on the website when we send through the link to the YouTube recording of this as well. Now, the first question that's come through is, I'll just read it out. What is the climate driver causing such a high percentage chance of above average nighttime / minimum temperatures in the January, February, March for 2023? Some impact on nighttime harvest temperatures there. What would be causing that? Not sure if that one's yours, Lynn, or was that?
I'll start and Jonathan might want to jump in. So we've seen warmer nighttime temperatures throughout the period. So you can see with La Nina as when you don't see as warm daytime temperatures, but with that cloud cover, with that heat not escaping at nighttime, with that more moisture around, you can see warmer nighttime temperatures there. But I will add in, we've always got, we've spoken about La Nina, IOD and SAM, but we've also got climate change as a driver that is included in our models as well. And with climate change, we do see those warmer nights and warmer days when we don't have that driver acting against it. Jonathan, did you want to add anything there?
I think you covered. Just to reiterate a bit, like when we see any high pressure system active, then we can expect clear days and nights and cooler nights. But when it is opposite, like low pressure system, cloudy situation, then definitely warmer nights are expected. Because of that reason, heat cannot just escape.
Okay, there's another question. Question reads, in the slide with heat wave duration in La Nina years, it appeared that Perth and southwest Western Australia did not have either red or blue dots. Does it not change for this area?
I don't know about that article specifically, but I think it was mainly looking at Eastern Australia because traditionally, I know Perth did have a little bit of wet there on the La Nina impact slide, but it doesn't get as much of an impact from ENSO than the eastern states do, with ENSO being driven by changes in the tropical Pacific. So it usually only gets an impact in those really big years. So yeah, so not as much impact in southwest WA from La Nina events, and perhaps not enough to pull out statistics for that study.
Okay. Yeah, at the moment, there's no other questions that have come through. I think everyone's they're out in the vineyard harvesting or they're happy with the presentation.
I just wanted to add one thing with that, what Lynn just said. Yes, definitely. The plot was shown, it was only relevant to La Nina condition, but that doesn't mean that Southwest Western Australia or Perth region cannot have a heat wave. They can, but it's not associated with La Nina condition as much the other regions.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jonathan.
Okay, look, there's no more questions that come through, so we might wind it up. So look, thank you very much, both Jonathan, Lynette, and also Rachel at the end here for providing a fantastic webinar on the recent weather and the future expected weather and climate drivers. I'm sure everyone who's joined today got a lot out of the session. Just like to remind everyone that there are resources that will be available, and we will send an email with the link to this recording for you within the next 24 hours. I'd also like to acknowledge Wine Australia providing funding and support for webinars by the Adabri Extension Project. And I'd just like to advertise the next webinar. The next webinar is on Thursday, the 8th of December, and it is entitled Next Generation Wineries. And if you'd like to register for this session, please visit the Adabri website.
I was just going to add, Matt, it looks like a few more questions while you were speaking have just come through.
I've just seen that. That's obviously just prompted the wind up has prompted a few more questions to come through. So if Lynn and Jennison are still there, yep. First one or the next one, sorry, is do you have a view on when we will get El Nino? Does it automatically follow?
I'll start again since I'm unmuted. We're not seeing any indication of that at the moment. So the climate models that are looking ahead, they're mostly going towards neutral in the next few months. So I don't know about you, but I'd be happy for a bit of neutral with what we've been seeing at the moment. So yeah, so there's no indication at the moment. It doesn't necessarily follow that that El Nino does follow a La Nina. We do sometimes see that seesawing, but we've hit the third La Nina in a row. I think the system hopefully losing a bit of energy, but yeah, certainly in the models we are not seeing any indications of an El Nino at this stage. But again, that's something that we monitor closely because it does have such an impact on Australia, and we put out fortnightly updates on current and forecast conditions. So, and you can sign up to receive those updates in your inbox as well. So if you're interested, yeah, that's something that you can do. Okay. Jonathan?
Just to add with that, yes, we do monitor and our models suggest, but there is a barrier to that. We cannot just predict like too much well ahead, like 6 months or a year. So it takes some time when it approaches this cycle breaks and then the new cycle comes, then there will be some confidence in the forecast. Otherwise, it's not wise to forecast at this point.
I guess maybe just to follow on from that one, the next question is it fair to say that the wet weather is easing? Might be from someone a lot of
Certainly we're not seeing as strong a sign in the models. As I was saying, if you've been following the outlooks for, especially for spring, it was, we had very high likelihood of above average conditions and also very high likelihood of that extremely wet conditions. So that signal is starting to ease and back away, and we are as we do go further into summer, and also the drivers such as the negative IOD is starting to weaken. We are seeing that weaken at the moment, and if it does stay at the current levels, we are looking towards the end of the IOD event for this year, and it does usually die off at this time of year when that monsoon does come down into the southern hemisphere. And also we are starting to see that weakening. Well, we are seeing a forecast weakening of the La Nina as well as we do go into summer.
Just to add with Lynette, even we are seeing it's slightly better maybe compared to the springtime, but we also have to remember that the antecedent condition, it's very wet, landscape is very wet, the streams are full, storages are full, so little bit of rainfall can bring the condition really worse because it's already very wet. So in terms of impact, it's not drying as immediately as we see that from.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Jonathan, that we do have those very wet conditions. So you don't necessarily need the record rainfall or really extreme rainfall to get perhaps the same impacts.
There's another question that's come through. I don't know who to direct this one to, but I'll just read them out. What is the optimal temperature on Earth? And what is the optimal increase or decrease in temperature per year if it cannot be maintained?
I'm not quite sure how to answer that one. I don't know if it's a climate change one. It might be related to the target of 1.5 degrees globally. So I know there has been some confusion when we're saying in our State of the Climate report that our climate is warmed, Australia has warmed by 1.47 degrees, but that is related to the land surface. So when you're talking global temperatures, when you're talking 1.5 globally, that's actually sea surface temperatures as well, which in Australia is closer to 1 degree of warming in the Australian region. So our land is actually warming at a comparative rate to other land surfaces. If you're talking the best to keep it to, I mean, if we can't, make 1.5, let's go for 1.6. If we can't make 1.6, let's go for 1.7. I think the important thing is to reduce our emissions as quickly as we can, and those are decisions that we have to make. And so the quicker we reduce our emissions, the less impacts we will see into the future. So the impacts that I described in those last few slides are what we've seen with the current warming that we have. And so Australia is very vulnerable with ENSO and with the IOD to variability on top of that climate trend. So this is something that we, for Australia, we do want to mitigate against.
Thanks, Lynn. I wasn't sure how, where that one fitted in. Look, there's no more questions come through. Just a couple of comments. The sentiment of the comments is that, it's a fantastic presentation, incredibly interesting, helpful and valuable for us. And I concur with that, those comments as well. And I thought it was a great session. So just like to reiterate to thank Lynn and Janatan and Rachel for providing their time today and presenting on the webinar program. And as I mentioned, it will become available within 24 hours on the Adabri YouTube channel. So I will sign off from here, and thanks for everyone, and hope everyone has a good day.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.